Wam Kahalo Yahweh Bashim Yahushai Bashim Kakadash, double honor to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us his truth. Shalom and salutations to all the brothers that push the word of truth and in sincerity, the hopeful elect tabernacle of David. I'm the brother Yahshua. I'm back with the WW3 Daily update. And as you guessed, it's Tuesday. It's War and Rumors of War Tuesday. All right. So, what we do on this day, we read Matthew 24:6, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And then we read the other versions to get a little perspective. So NIV reads wars and rumors of wars, right? But the NLT reads wars and threats of wars. So we have rumors and threats. Rumors. Jump down here. We got rumors and threats, and now we have reports of wars, Aramaic. Rumors, threats, and reports, and what else? And news of battles far away. Okay, so we got news, rumors, reports, and threats. Okay? And what do we do now? Well, yesterday I spent a good deal of time looking for something that I couldn't find. So I did go back and I found it. And it's dealing with the war in Eastern Europe between Russia and the so-called Ukraine. Okay? Now, with that being said, Russia hired a group called the Wagner Group, right? He hired some mercenaries called Wagner. And what I was trying to explain yesterday is the leader of Wagner calls on Putin to declare end of war. What does that mean? Okay? What is being said? What does this mean? All right? And what will happen as a result of this? Okay? Does it say anything? We'll just have to watch it. Okay, so let's watch this quickly, and then we'll go to the voice of reason and let him explain what's going on. See, because this falls right into wars and rumors of war. This guy says the war is over, right? Because he's the one on the ground. He's boots on the ground fighting this thing, right? But then you have the aristocracy and the enlightened ones, the Chaldeans of Russia, if you will, the ones that are calling the shots and telling the soldiers what to do. All right. Now, this guy's like, I'm not part of the Russian army. I'm Wagner. So let me tell you what you need to do. You need to call some sort of talks. We can sit down at the table and say, okay, you get this, we'll get that type of thing. So that's what he's saying. Their objectives have been fulfilled, if you will. That's what he's trying to say.
Wagner Group leader calls on Putin to declare end of war. Yevgeny Prigozhin, leader of the Wagner Group, asks the Russian authorities to declare the end of the war and concentrate on gaining a foothold in the occupied territories of Ukraine. For the authorities of the Russian Federation and for society as a whole, it is necessary to put some kind of bold full stop in the special military operation. The ideal option is to announce the end of the special military operation, to inform everyone that Russia has achieved the results that it planned, and in a sense, we have really achieved them. We have ground a huge number of soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine and can report to ourselves that our task has been completed. Theoretically, Russia has already received this full stop by destroying a large part of the active male population of Ukraine, by intimidating another part of it that has fled to Europe. Russia has cut off the Azov Sea and a large chunk of the Black Sea, seized a fat chunk of Ukraine's territory, and created a land corridor to Crimea, he added. Prigozhin claims that Russia can only gain a firm foothold, cling to the territories that already exist. At the same time, Prigozhin believes that there is one problem that the war caused. If earlier Ukraine was part of former Russia, now it is an absolutely national-oriented state. The militant wrote an entire article where he reflects on the importance of Bakhmut, the leak of Pentagon documents, and the upcoming offensive of the armed forces. Prigozhin is against any negotiations with Ukraine and wants the forces of Russia and Ukraine to meet in battle.
Okay, so that's one thing. The leak of government documents, right? That so called leak, that's a whole other ball of wax dealing with what? Wars and rumors of war. Okay? News, propaganda. What is it? All right? Because when you hear this is the news right here, this is news from the Russian side. What is the news from the Ukrainian side, if you will? Okay? And as far as the leaks, the leaked documents, what the leaked documents say that, well, you got American soldiers on the ground, you got NATO soldiers on the ground in Ukraine, been fighting from the beginning. And you got European Union soldiers on the ground, not the Ukraine. The Ukrainians have been long uh, narrowed down, if you will. Ground down are the terms that they're using. So what's really going on over here? Okay, let's watch another one. That was one. I got a couple of them. Let's see. And they're probably going to say the same thing. Let's see. That was one. Let's watch this one. Commercial first. All right. Russia-Ukraine war. Wagner chief Evgeny Prigozhin calls for end of war.
Now, the leader of the Russian paramilitary force Wagner Group and someone believed to have President Vladimir Putin's ear, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has called for an end to the war in Ukraine. This, he says, should be done.
How can he call for an end of the war? He's just a soldier, okay? But he's a mercenary. He's not part of the Russian, apparatus, if you will. He's a soldier for hire. He's a mercenary, if you will. And they're saying, look, we got our job done. Let's pronounce right now that we won before before we lose, before we get overrun by, the next wave of whatever the war is about to turn into. That's basically what he's saying. Here come NATO, here come the EU in force, and they're gonna let the cat. Now that the cat has been let out of the bag with the document disclosure, if you will, we might as well fight this out in the open. They know that that's what's coming next.
To the war in Ukraine. This, he says, should be done as Russia has achieved all of its planned goals in its special operation. Prigozhin wrote a comment on the messaging app Telegram and called on the Russian president to declare that Moscow has, and I quote, won the special military operation by exterminating a large part of the male population in Ukraine and occupying its territories.
Okay, and that was probably the special operation. That was, well, we're going to take the Donbass, we're going to take these little areas that were contested, right? Because that was what the war has been going on since 2014. And that was the special operation. But what do the Russians and what does Putin actually want? They want to take all of Ukraine, not just the east. They want to take the whole country back. Now, to take it back means that it once belonged to Russia, as does all of the countries involved in the Soviet Union. Okay? The whole Soviet Union is what Russia wants. Okay, not just the eastern part of the Ukraine. So whatever this guy's saying, hey, my job is done, get me out of here before it gets bad. All right.
And now he says the ideal option is to announce the end of the special operation and declare Russia's victory. He wrote that for the authorities and society as a whole, it is necessary to put an end to the operation. According to him, since Russia has already killed a large number of Ukrainian soldiers, it can report that the missions in the special operation have been completed.
Now, has the special operation been completed? Yeah, but not the war. Now there's a war. Special operation is what they called it. Just like the Vietnam wasn't called a war. The Nam is what the soldiers called it. But they didn't want to call it a war because then you have to play by the rules of war. What did they call it? They called it a conflict. All right, so that's just semantics, if you will.
He added that Russia has occupied a large part of Ukraine's territory and even managed to create a land corridor to the Crimean Peninsula, one of the key pre-war goals. The Wagner Group has actively participated in the Russian war in Ukraine and has spearheaded attacks in Ukrainian towns of Soledar and Bakhmut.
Okay. So that's what I was talking about yesterday, that this guy is declaring an end to what? The special operation. This guy, Evgeny Prigozhin. All right, and that's he's calling for what is it? Peace and safety now that they done killed half of the Ukrainian men. Is it going to go down like that? No. They're going to keep pushing forward. At least NATO, the EU, and the whore that sitteth upon the beast. They're going to keep. It's not going to stop. It's going to turn into World War III. Now, with that, let's go to the homie, this guy. All right. The voice of reason. Let's see. Let me set this up. Okay, so this is Military and Foreign Affairs Network. 1 hour ago. All right. Battlefield. Ukraine. Siege of Bakhmut. The final outcome. Now listen closely to what this guy is going to say. All right. Now, mind you that this is Wars and Rumors of War Tuesday. So just keep that in mind. And we're just getting a little update on what the hell may or may not be going on. We're going to let him tell it. Go ahead.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Now today I want to start off and I want to talk about the Western media. I want to talk about the state of affairs in the ongoing war reporting that is occurring here in the United States and even in Western areas, but namely here in the United States. So if you're watching the news here in the U.S., and that really runs the gambit, any mainstream news outlet, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, CNN, they seem to have taken this position that the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian armed forces, is going to absolutely defeat the Russian military. And again, that position is the eventual reclaiming of all of the Donbass to include the Crimea. That seems to be the position of U.S. media. The media here in the United States, and it becomes more or less apparent depending on the news source that you're watching, is touting the U.S. Pentagon government line in terms of whatever the U.S. government is saying. The media is then parroting that information. It is affirming, whether it's true or not, what is happening on the ground.
Okay, let me stop it right there because this is War and Rumors of War Tuesday. Propaganda, news, reports, threats, rumors. Okay, what's the truth? All right, confused yet? The fog of war sets in.
Now, here's the problem with that. Journalism, the media here in the United States, was really designed to be another arm, you could say, of the government, in that it, maybe not necessarily an arm of government, but it serves as a check and balance and ultimately the arbiter of truth of what's happening on the ground. So if, for instance, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, reports something that is
not true,
maybe a false narrative, maybe it assists the political apparatus of the political party in charge,
propaganda,
then the media is supposed to identify that through investigative journalism and then offer a counterclaim. Now, recently, those documents, those hundreds of documents that were released by the 21-year-old $13 an hour airman, are being completely, really disregarded. It is more about the fact that that airman allegedly is a traitor to the United States. None of the media outlets are looking at the information that was leaked in terms of, okay, well, we're hearing this from the Department of Defense, but this information that's being released apparently is a little different than what we're being told. For instance, U.S. Special Operations Forces on the ground in Ukraine. North Atlantic Treaty Organization Special Operations Forces from a variety of countries on the ground, quite possibly participating in combat against Russian forces. So it's interesting that at one point in American history, the American media would be clamoring for that information. And what's even more disconcerting is apparently several news outlets that are in the inner circle of the Democrat Party quite possibly already had that information. Meaning that information that was leaked, which is no longer classified, but they're gonna throw that kid in jail, probably, or try to throw him in jail the rest of his life. When individuals in the Washington Post, CNN, probably already had that information. So why did they not want to let that information out? Why does the Washington Post, why does CNN, especially these media organizations that gravitate more towards the Democratic Party, why do they not want that information out? Well, it contradicts their narrative that the Ukrainians are winning the war and the Russians are being defeated and will in all probability be eventually driven out of the Donbass, and the Crimean Peninsula will be retaken by Ukrainian forces. That's what CNN, that's what the Washington Post wants you, the American viewer, to believe. Now, the problem with that, it's simply not true. Now, have the Ukrainians experienced success? Yes, absolutely. I've talked about that. If we look at the start of the conflict, going into the conflict, the talking heads at the Pentagon, even the higher command elements, Joint Chiefs of Staff over at the Pentagon, were stating that the Russians would be in Kiev in a matter of days. This would last days, and they were wrong, completely wrong on that. They were wrong about Syria. They've been wrong about a multitude of things. They were wrong about Afghanistan. They are wrong when they get up and they say that a man can have a baby. I had to throw that in there, but it's part of the equation where me, the voice of reason, has to sit back and say, wait a minute, I don't agree with what you're saying, and I have to second guess what you're saying. I'm not buying this. And that's what's happening in the course of this conflict. Yes, the Ukrainians have experienced a much greater degree of success than anybody would have believed possible kind of going into this conflict. But the problem is wars ultimately are not measured on tactical battlefield wins. Wars can last years. Wars is about industry. It's about resources. It is about mobilization. And that document leak indicates things are not going as hoped for. With the amount of intelligence the U.S. is providing, the amount of money the U.S. is providing, the amount of weapon systems the U.S. is providing to the Ukrainians. And not only that, obviously the direct use of U.S. military forces inside of Ukraine. I've talked about before that I believe that F-22s, F-35s, or some other classified stealth asset is being used over eastern Ukraine, central Ukraine, to monitor and report what the Russians are doing, where they're at, and then allowing Ukrainian long-range fire systems to engage those targets. Yes, those systems are having an impact in certain areas of the conflict zone, and obviously it's an issue that I don't believe the Russians were completely prepared for. If you look at the initial operation that took place towards Kiev, that Russian force that moved in column towards its objectives over roadways did not appear to be a force that was prepared for the type of resistance that it met. Now, the Russians are adapting, and we're seeing that on the ground now. We're seeing traditional Russian doctrine being used to great effect in this ongoing conflict, especially Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and other areas. Again, we're not seeing maneuver operations. We're seeing fix and destroy operations. We're seeing the deep battle strategy of the Russian military being used against the Ukrainians. Now, how does that manifest itself on the battlefield? Well, you hear it. You hear anecdotal reports on how that deep battle strategy is manifesting itself on the battlefield. You have Ukrainian lieutenants, Ukrainian NCOs, Ukrainian privates talking about the lack of ammunition. The fact that they're allowed to fire up to 10 rounds of artillery per day at Russian forces. That there is a lack of ammunition, and that lack of ammunition is because the Russians are targeting and going after.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and end it right there because there's another 10 minutes and I don't want to go all the way in. Now I'm going to give you my synopsis. Okay, when the when whatever his name was, Yevgeny Sharapoja, whatever his name was, of Wagner. Basically, what he was saying is this: okay, hey, guess what? After a year's worth of fighting, these men are ready for World War III. The whole meat grinder situation was about, preparing. There's no better preparation uh, for war than a skirmish or a battle. So now they're battle hardened. Who's battle hardened? All the Russians that went in and got some. You got people, in all uh, militaries that have never seen combat, and until you've been in combat, in some brutal combat, then you're not battle tested, as they call it. So anyway, we'll go ahead and end it right there. All right. Uh, there's a lot of information there, a lot to unpack, but basically, you know, they're calling for an end, you know, to, the war at large in East. It's going to be because there's another theater that's beginning to stir up, two actually. The one that's being shown to the world is in the South China Sea with China, Taiwan, and the US. The one that's being obscured or hidden is the one in the Middle East, the main event, if you will. All right, so yeah, I'll just read this one more time. All right, because this is where we are. Matthew 24:6. In the NIV, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see that you are not alarmed. Why? Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. So we got a lot of war left. Okay? That ain't the end of it over there. You understand? Just because, oh, well, we want this to come. Well, the war's going to die down and everybody's going to wave a white flag. And no, that's not what's going on. We're going here. We're going all the way to the end of Esau's rulership. Okay? And it's going to end in nuclear war, nuclear annihilation. All right? For the nation of Edom. This is Revelation 11 and 14. The second woe has passed. Behold, the third woe is coming shortly. Okay? We're not very far from mutually assured, okay? MAD, M-A-D, the acronym MAD. Mutually assured destruction is what's going to end this war. Where? In the valley of Yehoshaphat. Okay? What is Joel 3? Okay? Joel 3 and 2, I will gather the armies of the world into the valley of Yehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat, the Middle East. That's where the judgment will take place. The last judgment of the nation of Edom. There I will judge them. Okay? Where is the last battle of Armageddon going to be fought? In the valley of Yehoshaphat, which is in the Middle East. Where? There will I judge them, the final judgment. Okay? There will I put them on trial. There will I judge them and will enter into judgment with them there. Where? The valley of Jehoshaphat. Okay? And will plead with them. Where? There. The valley of Yehoshaphat, God's judgment. Okay? Enter into judgment. All right? They're on trial right now. And it's almost time for the sentencing phase. That's what this whole war, rumors of war, this whole thing is about. All right, so with that, we hope that the electorate edified you, brothers and few sisters. With that, I'm going to say shalom.